Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan with a hot take. One of the guys I follow on Twitter is a guy by the name of James Lindsay, Lidsay, and he is one of the guys who wrote all these great fake articles for for these academics to look at. They scam the academics into thinking that these incredibly woke articles that were just total parody were actual studies. And some of these academics took them as gospel and reprinted them and gave them awards. And it was to expose how academics and the humanities in particular and gender studies has just become absolutely a cesspool of nonsense. And so he writes these articles about wokeness, and this one's pretty good. I thought I'd share some of it with you. He has a site called, or he's on a site called newdiscourses.com, and the article is "No, the Woke Won't Debate You. Here's Why." And so I'm going to read you some excerpts. He says, "I can't tell you how many times I've been asked why it is that the woke won't seem to have a debate or discussion about their views. And I've been meaning to write something about it for ages, probably a year at this point. Surely you'll have noticed that they don't tend to engage in debates or conversations." I've noticed that too. I've tried to engage on Reddit and Imgur and a few other places. They won't engage, not for very long before they start calling you all sorts of nasty names. He continues, "It is not, as many think, a fear of being exposed as fraudulent or illegitimate, or otherwise losing the debate or looking bad in the challenging conversation. That prevents those who have internalized a significant amount of critical social justice theory mindset that prevents these sort of things from happening. There is a mountain of theoretical reasons that they would avoid all such activities, and even if those are mere rationalizations of a more straightforward fear of being exposed as fraudulent or losing. They are shockingly well-developed and consistent rationalizations that deserve proper consideration and full explanation." Now, I can't read you the whole thing, but you should definitely check out the articles. So I'm going to skip down. He's got 5 main reasons. But that paragraph there really hit me because, yeah, it frustrates me to discuss these things because I think, yeah, I can prove my point, and these people gotta go, well, okay. And sometimes that happens, but a lot of times these days it just doesn't. It's just people who are just ideologically possessed. Um, and understand that Lindsay is working on various projects that really study this stuff. So he's got 5 main points here. I'm going to read you a bit of them. Number 1, they think the system is rigged against them. The first thing to understand about the way adherents to critical social justice view the world is just how deeply they have accepted the belief that we operate within a wholly systematically oppressive system. That system extends to literally everything, not just material structures, institutions, law, policies, and so on, but also into cultures, mindsets, ways of thinking, and how we determine what is and isn't true about the world. In their view, the broadly liberal approach to knowledge and society is, in fact, rotted through with, quote, white Western male and so on biases. And this is such a profound departure from how the rest of us broadly liberals think about the world that it's almost impossible to understand just how deeply, profoundly they mean this. Yeah. And he gets into some more specific examples of that. But that's, yeah, they think everything's oppression. Everything's oppression. And James is not the first person to talk about this. When you talk about SJWs, certainly Sargon of Akkad has mentioned this many times. And this really, a lot of it begins, I would say, with feminism. The intersectional feminism, the fourth wave feminism, third wave feminism, that was all headed towards this, and you can see the process. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, it doesn't matter what you say to them, by your very nature, you're an oppressive figure. Um, and I am reminded that I'm thinking about doing a separate video on this, but there is, remember I did a video on the Network. This is a group of female comic book pros, ostensibly, who have a secret Facebook group where they plot to essentially destroy male comic pros or damage their careers in some way because they want power in comics because comics are so powerful. Anyhow, number two, a metaphysics of discourses. Secondly, the organizing principle of their worldview is that two things structure society: discourses and systems of power maintained by discourses. Regarding the systems of power, their underlying belief is genuinely that of the critical theorist. Society is divided into oppressors versus oppressed. And the oppressors condition the beliefs of the culture of society such that they nor the oppressed are aware of the realities of their oppression. That is, everyone who isn't woke to the realities of systematic oppression lives in a form of false consciousness. Members of dominant groups have internalized their dominance by accepting it as normal, natural, earned, and justified, and therefore unaware of the oppression they create. Members of the minoritized groups have internalized their oppression by accepting it as normal, natural, and just the way things are, and are therefore unaware of the extent of the oppression they suffer or its true sources. In both cases, though in different ways to different ends, the falsely conscious needs to be awakened to a critical consciousness, i.e., becoming critical theorist, i.e., becoming woke, basically. So really, it sort of bolsters his first point, which is they think the system is rigged. And not only is it rigged, because there's only oppressors and the oppressed. And they're always the oppressed. They're always the ones oppressed. If they were the oppressors, they couldn't even make this thing work. Which is funny because the moment they gain power, like, what the hell are they going to do? Because by the very nature of power, it's oppressive. Except when they wield it, they have all sorts of justification. And that's where the Marxism comes in. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this too, and he's definitely on the same page here in terms of always being the victim. These people are. They're always victimized. And I would add that I think a lot of that comes from the culture of women. And I don't say that's all women. It's not all women. But I think there is a fallback position for a lot of women when they get in trouble. A lot of women will just cry. And that in its own way is sort of like, well, I'm just a precious little flower and you're crushing me kind of move. And they instantly become a victim because you're making them cry. Now, that's not all women, but it is a tactic that is more womanly than manly. It's not a manly tactic at all, and some men use it. I have personal knowledge of a man who used that tactic, and it's very effective. If you're ever even if you're a guy, if you're ever in a truly bad situation, bust out crying, you might get yourself out of it. Number 3, no true disagreement. This one I don't totally have my brain wrapped around, but I'll read some. Thirdly, adding this is a theme we draw out significantly in the 8th chapter of Cynical Theories, which I believe is his book. I think it's called that. They believe all disagreement with them to be illegitimate. If we followed from Dotson in the paper named above, and another slightly earlier one in 2011 about epistemic violence, it could be pinned on what she calls pernicious ignorance. Robin DiAngelo would call it white fragility to disagree. Allison Bailey refers to it as an attempt to preserve one's privilege under the term George Carlin lived to make fun of, privilege preserving epistemic pushback. Epistemic. Whew. 4 words, 12 syllables, 1 hyphen. Further, Bailey said all attempts to criticize social justice thought because they come from, quote, critical thinking and not, quote, critical theory tradition, within which they obviously agree, generate shadow text that follow along but don't truly engage in the correctly critical way, i.e., agreement with her. I think what this all basically says is that anything that you disagree with in an SJW is automatically wrong, because you are privileged because you disagree. Because you don't agree with the SJWs, then you're part of the problem already. And since you don't understand, there's no point in debating with you because you're broken already. And they, until you agree with them, you have no standing to critique them, and once you agree with them, you'd have no reason to critique them. I think it's a bit heady, that number 3, but this one you'll get. Number 4, guilt by association with racist. Fourthly, the critical social justice view sees people who occupy positions of systematic power and privilege, and yet who refuse to acknowledge and work to dismantle them to the full satisfaction of the critical social justice theorists to be utterly morally reprehensible. They are racist, they are misogynist, they hate trans people and want to deny their way of existence. They are bigots, they are fascists, they are literal Nazis. Not only that, they are willfully so, and their main objective is to defend and spread their hateful ideology in the world. If you truly believe this is about people you've been asked to have a conversation with, would you be about to help them do that by giving them a platform and lending your own imprimatur to them? Of course not. Such views are not even to be tolerated, much less entertained, engaged with, platform, or amplified. So not only can you not argue with them, not only can you not disagree with them, if you do, then it's just a matter of time before you're called a bigot and a racist, and because they'll just find, and I've been called that too. I mean, anytime I mention Comicsgate or Trump or, it's, oh, you're a racist. It's just ridiculous. And it sounds very much like, the women in comics secret Facebook group and what they do. It sounds very much like the Black Lives Matter Antifa rioters and all the SJWs. Finally, they're too tired. As a 5th and final point, since this is getting pretty long already, remember that critical social justice activists tell us more or less how they constantly exhausting it is to fight the constant uphill battle in which no one takes them seriously, i.e. fight shadows of their own nightmarish projection. They tell us constantly about the high emotional labor cost of doing the work they do and never being taken seriously for it. Yeah, there's a reason, because it's ridiculous. Gender studies is ridiculous. Intersectionalism and third wave feminism. I mean, all this stuff is just dumb. And, as soon as you start drilling down into what race, I mean, the New York Times is now announcing people's race in articles. So-and-so who is black and so-and-so who is white. I mean, it's that bad. And then the quick summary. One of the biggest mistakes we make as liberals who value debate, dialogue, conversation, reason, evidence, epistemic adequacy, fairness, civility, clarity of argument, and all these other master's tools is that we can expect the advocates of critical social justice also value them. They don't. Or we make the mistake that we can possibly pin critical social justice advocates into having to defend their views in debate or conversations. We can't. These principles and values are rejected to their very roots within critical social justice worldview. And so the request for an advocate to have debate or conversation with someone who disagrees will, to the degree they have adopted critical social justice theoretical ideology, faith, to be a complete non-starter. It literally is a request to do the exact opposite of everything their ideology instructs with regard to how the world and systematic oppression within it operates, to participate in their own oppression and maintain oppression of people they claim to speak for. Yeah, this is something we touched on kind of unconsciously in Wokeistan. So there's a scene where G is the ostensible leader of the social justice warriors in Wokeistan, and she's brought before the student government at Upstate College, and they're essentially going to give her a slap on the wrist for events in the book and send her on her way and just make the whole thing go away, so the college can go back to normal life. But G won't even acknowledge the student government or anything that it stands for, and won't engage, and just makes her own pronouncement and marches out with her followers, and they're like, hey! That's kind of the way they are. So if you confronted an SJW and said, well, debate me, they wouldn't debate you. And even if they showed up to a debate and they kind of got cornered into it, they would probably just use it to grandstand and march out on you or shout you down, depending on the venue, so you couldn't speak at all. And so only they could speak, because they're operating from the standpoint that the very idea of debating and the very idea that they would have to defend themselves is oppression. Everything's oppression. That's all you really need to know at the end of the day. Everything's oppression to these people. And at the same time, they want power. They want it all. Until they get all the power, everything's oppression. When they have all the power, it won't matter what's oppression. That'll all go by the wayside. They'll be too busy, pushing their Marxist ideology. So anyhow, check out James Lindsay and newdiscoursescot.com if you want to read the rest of the article. It's really good. And he's got a bunch of other articles here. He's got the Social Justice Encyclopedia. It's really great. And that's it.